Today, we are talking about creating ministry partnerships. And Jason, when we talk about ministry partnerships and how Church Project has approached this and how this fits into a church of house churches, it can feel like, even when I first read it, is this outsourcing ministries? Because so many churches historically have approached outreach and ministry as something like, this is what we're supposed to do as a church. You have approached this in a very different model, both financially and functionally. Can you talk a little bit about how this came about of creating ministry partnerships within this model?
Yeah, man. Well, it's a combination of convictions and calling, what we're called to do, and logic and wisdom and just thinking and rethinking a little bit. I mean, I know I'm biblically convicted. I'm supposed to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and give water to the thirsty and take care of the widow and the orphan and the oppressed. I mean, that's pretty clear that Jesus has called his church to do that. But there's no way in the world that I'm going to be able to figure out, the clean water solution as a pastor or as a church collectively. But there are people who have that figured out. There's no way I'm going to figure out the human trafficking solution, but we should be doing something. The most oppressed people on the planet are being trafficked, the most vulnerable people. We should be doing something. But I have no idea how to even step into that. And so, when we started Church Project, I just knew, man, we have to lead all of our people to be engaged in these things that Jesus has called us to be engaged in. But if I wait until we have the infrastructure, the money, the leadership, the knowledge, the organizational power to affect change in these ways, we'll never get there. And so early on, we just said, hey, what do we have? We have very few people. I mean, we started with 40 people, but we need to do something. So we started partnering with an organization locally who was working with kids aging out of foster care. And we started partnering with, vulnerable unwed mothers who were considering abortion as their only alternative. So there were two organizations that we knew we can get into the lives of people. And then we started building from there. And so the beautiful thing is these organizations need the church, but the church in many ways has not ever admitted that they need these organizations. And so the churches wanted to create these ministries themselves, have their own name on it, their own controls over it. And so it's a humbling thing as a church to say, hey, we don't know how to do this. We'll never know how to do it as well as you. Our name's not going to be on it. We don't have control, but you need us and we need you. That's the beauty of a real partnership for me. The definition of a partnership would include some reciprocity of influence, of need. And so we partner with organizations who need us and we need them. And I have a lot more to say about it, but I'll let you continue asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. And when I was reading the book, it was like this light bulb going off of why aren't more churches doing this? And I think you hit on that, Jason, of we want to control it, probably being the primary reason we haven't done that. Are there any other reasons, or even do you think it's pretty much all control as to why churches have tried to do it all themselves?
Well, I don't think it's bad for a church to say, hey, there's a ministry that we need to start or we can start. And, some churches are, they're so theologically tight. There's no room in their companionship with other Christians to step outside of their really small theological stream. And so that would include partnerships. And so most partnerships have a little wider theological stream than a church does. And so for us, we're willing to work with gospel focused, like unashamed about the gospel. We're going to only partner with a ministry that's about Jesus, where we can freely, share the gospel. But we don't expect, I think this is the thing, Nils, I don't expect an organization that we partner with to be a church. And so if I'm planting another church project, we have exact theological alignment. We may partner with other church planting organizations where the theological alignment is a little wider. But when it comes to a nonprofit organization, I don't expect them to be a church. I just expect them to be focused on Jesus as the ultimate healer in whatever domain they're working in. And then together we can partner on the other things as long as we can share the gospel. So I think a lot of churches don't partner with other organizations because there's some expectation that this organization needs to be a church. They're not a church.
Yeah.
They're focused on an
Yes.
aspect of something that the church needs to be doing. So let's partner with them. And so I think that some churches are maybe they're too critical or they're too arrogant or they're too controlling about these things. We can't partner with somebody who's not exactly aligned with us and everything. I think that's really wild. I will also say, I think that that was my viewpoint, my way of thinking for much of my life. So the more I've understood the gospel, the more I have grace on the edges for some different things. And so
Yes.
now I have a lot of freedom to partner with people, especially though I'm not expecting this human trafficking organization to be a church. Let's focus on Jesus together. We have the same gospel down, but the rest of the stuff, man, I don't need theological controls over that. So I think that's a big reason why they don't. And another thing would be arrogance. I want my name on it. You know, this is our ministry.
Yep.
And so, you know, I think that's another reason too, Neil. Control, whether it be theologically or organizationally, and then we want the identity.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, and I think we might not want to say that, and that's, you know, there's gonna be toes that are stepped on, but I think if we're honest, that's real. Jason, very practically, I'm curious how, even when you were 40 people trying to begin to flesh this out, how did you choose those first partners? And, you know, practically you can't support every nonprofit. You can't support every, you know, potential ministry partner. So how do you go about practically choosing and then even divvying up the pool of resources to partner with those ministries?
Really difficult decisions, which is why, you know, leaders have to use wisdom and discernment. And so, you know, we had a few principles that we knew we're going to keep practicing these things. For example, we're not going to have multiple partners within a specific domain. Like when we decide, okay, we have to be about helping people who don't have water get clean water. Jesus talked about giving people water when they're thirsty. So we got to do that. But there are 1,000 or more great water giving organizations. So how do we decide which one? We look at connections we have. One of our other principles is, where can we partner with people, not just a check? Like, where can our people actually get involved here? And then another principle we have is there a connection between this organization? Is there an easy, short bridge to the local church? And so we have some filters, some principles we have. Can we send people, not just a check? Can we get to the church quickly? Can we build a bridge between this organization and the local church? We're only going to work with one organization in this domain. And then do we have any personal connections to our local church here, which help provide that? These are some of the things that we look at. Of course, you know, can we share the gospel in this thing? Are they Jesus focused? And so when we put all those things together, it starts to narrow the pot a little bit. And then we start to pray through really 2 or 3 or 4 options at our disposal, see which ones we think will be the strongest with allowing people to get engaged. Bridging to the local church, how getting the gospel into this ministry conversation with people as we're serving them. So we start to look at that. Secondly is, are we able to do anything else right now? You know, our board at some point pulled me way back and they're like, you can't say yes to anybody anymore without talking to us. Cause I'm like, I'm out there in the world and I'm finding the needs, and we may be in another country and I find a legitimate need. And I'm like, we got to do this. And so we got really wide for a while, and we needed to go deeper with the people that we were fully committed to. And so, you know, like the question is, what can we do right now? There are things. I literally came to this meeting from another meeting with one of our ministry partners, and they have a greater need. The meeting I had before that was our board meeting, and our board said, hey, we cannot do any more than we're doing now for the foreseeable future. And so what can we do? I would like to have a lot more yeses than we have now. We have some good yeses out there, but what can we do? Does it fit in our domains? Where the principles line up? And then we just start adding on the next domain, you know? And so we look at, human trafficking. We look at water providing. We look at feeding the homeless under bridges. We look at all these different domains, and we sort of see what's
Mm.
available, what's next, and then we have to pray and talk about it.
Yes.
So, but once we say yes to somebody, we want to keep this. The person I just left had 7 years we've been with them. Another person was 11 years. So we really like to stay with a ministry partner for a long time if it continues
Yes.
to be fruitful.
I love it. I love it. And Jason, how do you integrate your house churches into basically even awareness of these ministry partners or even the congregation as a whole? What is the even storytelling or narrative around how do people know what who Church Project is partnering with
Yeah.
from a ministry partnership standpoint?
Perfect question. I think some churches align around different things. Some churches align their community around homogeneity. Like these are the 25-year-olds with one child, and this is who you're going to be
Yep.
in community with, or some churches align around, mission. Like this is the church that focuses in on foster care or adoption, or this is the group or the house church or whatever that focuses on the homeless. But the problem for me is one, geography, and two, diversity. And so we at Church Project, we gather geographically, which forces diversity, but it really elevates access to community. When my house church is down the street from me, well, I can be engaged with this community more often. I'm going to run into them at the grocery store or at the coffee shop. My kids are going to be on the same bus going to school, whatever. And so we're going to see each other a lot more when we gather geographically. It forces diversity. And part of that diversity is personal calling. And so in every house church, we have people that are doing a lot of different things. They're serving in a lot of different ways. Otherwise, if this house church is focused on homogeneity rather than diversity, my house church may be across the city. The people that serve in foster care may be 30, 40 minutes away from me. And that's not a real sustainable approach to community. And so because we have so many different ministries represented in so many different house churches, our ministry partners get visibility across house churches through our Sunday gatherings, through our social networks, through our communication channels, through our weekly emails that we send out to everyone. So a typical Sunday gathering, not every Sunday, but almost always, we have a different ministry partner who will come share with our whole body coming from a lot of different house churches. Hey, this is our ministry. We ask them, hey, what is your ministry? How has Church Project partnered with you? And what do you need prayer for? And they get like 3 minutes. We give them visibility in each of our gatherings. And then that week, we're sending more information to our people, whether social media channels, whether our email that goes out to our people, whether they're the house church guide that our house church pastor gets, they're going to talk about it and pray for this ministry. And we tell people in our church, every one of our ministry partners is not for you, but one of them likely is. And so maybe this one's for you. Maybe helping prisoners when they get off the bus so they can get right into a healthy life. Maybe that's the ministry for you, welcoming prisoners when they get off the bus and transitioning them back into society.
Yeah.
Maybe that's for you. Maybe not. Maybe it's something else. And so we just tell our people, get involved in something, start giving your life to something. And so we're going to give you 35 or so different examples throughout the year of what you can do, and choose one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Jason, one of the reasons that I believe, or I've heard definitively of why churches don't want to introduce even some of their missional partners to their congregation is they're nervous their congregation is going to give directly to that missional partner, not give to the church.
Yeah.
How have you approached that, or how do you even mindset align to that and communicate that with your congregation?
Well, I don't blame them for being scared because it's going to happen, So what's the alternative? The alternative is that we don't introduce our congregation to anything, or that we only do things through our church. So we let our people know, when you give to us, when you give collectively, we collectively are giving to these organizations. It's much more effective for this organization to be getting support from Church Project than it is to be getting support from 40 people in Church Project who work with them, who serve in their ministry. And so, but some people are going to circumvent giving to our church, and they're going to give to the affinity that they love the most. Like, I love this ministry so much. I only have so much to give. I'm going to give around the church. I'm going to give to it. So, part of it for us is discipleship. We just disciple people like, hey, we give like one body. We have a one fund kind of giving. We can't, it just wouldn't work if all of us, we have plenty of New Testament examples about uh, the apostles saying, hey, bring your money, lay it here at the feet. The leadership of the church is called to determine how that money's going to be distributed. They're accountable for it, but we give as one body. And we see that example all throughout the New Testament, in addition to all the benevolence that each one of us are called to give. So, like, for example, in every house church, I think we've talked about this on another episode, maybe not, but we have no idea all the giving that's happening within every house church. I mean, people are paying hospital bills and buying each other cars and paying mortgages and helping people with things. We have no idea. We don't try to quantify that. In addition to that, if we could quantify all the money that is given to these organizations via the relationship of Church Project, but that doesn't go through us, I mean, our giving would be off the roof. If we quantify it, how much giving was happening between people in house churches and between Church Project people and the organization that we introduce them to, I mean, it would be awesome. But I don't want to measure that. I don't want to try to control. I don't know. So it will happen. So I just tell the church, start to disciple towards common giving. Make sure that you're letting your people know, when you give here together, this is what we're doing. We're church planting together. We're supporting ministry partnerships together. We keep telling these stories all the time. When a ministry partner gets up on a Sunday and says, your church gives more to us than any other church combined, all the other churches combined, well, that's really great. And we hear that a lot. Or y'all serve with us more than all the other churches combined. We have more people from you. Like, the ministry partner gets up and they say that on their own. They don't go to our church. But they're just telling us how generous we are. That really encourages our people to keep giving. When we have a little saying, simplicity for the sake of generosity. I mean, we're living as simply as we can. Our staff ratio is so low compared to other churches. We try to be mortgage neutral with having our building rented out. So those things allow us to be more generous. So these are all dominoes that fall.
Yes. One of the things I've loved in reading your book, Jason, is that as I was reading, and decentralization is kind of the opposite of what I grew up in ministry, because it was so focused on multiplication through the efficiency of centralization. And I think so much of this philosophy is letting go of control, and that's so hard in so many ways. And I think you're answering so many of the questions of how and why to do that. And it's not easy. And I think probably, you'd probably say there's been places that you've had to adjust along the way with that. I'm curious, is there, as you look back on your ministry partnerships, is there one that maybe stands out more than any other, of just like this is when this really worked well? This is when we hit the bullseye in identifying a great ministry partnership for our congregation.
Man, that's a great question. It's hard for me to answer because we really have some great relationships with our ministry partners for a long time. One ministry that stands out to me that's very large now and it's very effective. They were starting and they came to our church after 1 or 2 years at another church after they had started their ministry. I met with them and I said, hey, look, how much has that church been supporting you? We at least want to maintain that. And they said, I think they gave us, $200 twice. And I said, wow, this ministry talked about you all the time as if they supported you. And they said, well, yeah, they sort of talk like that, but they didn't really. I said, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start giving you. And I gave them a number that was like 10 times that every month. And they were just blown away. And I said, we're going to do that. We're going to commit to do that at least for the next 2 years. And it allowed them to make some changes in their infrastructure. They were able to bring a person on full time that was just barely part time. They were able to do some other things. And that's what they needed to just go atmospheric. And so like over the years, we ended up giving them less and less because they needed less from us and we could redistribute it to other people, but we were able to help them raise their platform And so they needed us less later than they needed us in the beginning. But to see that organization just go to the next level and we could help them do that was awesome. And so we've seen that
Yeah.
happen with a couple of our ministries, and it's great.
Jason, I do a lot of nonprofit fundraising work, helping nonprofits raise money. As you're describing this model, my mind is going to, if more churches would take this approach, would nonprofits even need to do fundraising, or could they just
Yeah,
focus on the collective work being done by the capital C church, working
right.
together? Have you seen any examples of that, or do you see that as a potential outcome if more churches would buy into this decentralized approach to ministry partnerships?
Well, I mean, I speak about this often. I was at a national forum a couple of weeks ago. I spoke about this. I I love to see churches get pressure put on them for what I
Mhm.
think is a real imbalance of spending. I mean, the last
Mm.
statistic I heard on this was years ago. I haven't heard an updated one, but 98% of churches keep 97% of money within their own walls. And so they're not
Mm.
church planting, they're not supporting ministry partnerships, but their staff to parishioner ratio is so high. Their buildings are designed to be used for 2 or 3 hours a week, and it can't be rented out, and they're so expensive. And so, like churches have to redesign, reapproach, dare I say, rethink the way they've been doing everything and return to what
Mhm.
we see happening early on. And so, I have seen some churches where they're hearing about this, or their people are putting pressure on them for this, maybe from us or maybe from other sources or whatever. And they're starting to go, we can't continue doing this anymore. And so we're seeing a little bit of a shift. But Nils, the reality is, if every church would shift to just what we're doing, um,
Yes.
if ever, and we're not at all where we want to be, but if every church would shift to just what we're doing, you're exactly right. There would be no nonprofit need. If every church in our
Mm.
city supported all the nonprofits in our city the way that we do, every nonprofit in our city would be fine. And I think if every church in every city did that, it'd be awesome. So, yeah,
Wow.
man, we're seeing a little bit of a shift. And we're going to do our one small part for us. And, some years are easier than others. I mean, we're in a little bit of a
Yes.
giving dip right now with our church. And so, but
No.
also other churches all around us that I know. I was with national leaders last week. A lot of people are going through it. There are a few unicorns who aren't, but many are right now. And so, our discretionary giving would be those ministry partnerships. We got to pay our small staff. We
Yeah.
got to pay our mortgage here, which is, really small comparatively speaking, but our discretionary giving is ministry partnerships. If money's here, we're going to give it to them. If it's not, we won't. But we want to give more, and more. So
Mm.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's so good. And then can you speak to that? How do you determine how much you give and what percentage goes outside those walls? And is it year to year you review it, or what is the maybe even for a church, and from an advice standpoint, a church that is giving 2% right now, how do they start moving away from that? Because that's a hard switch to flip when you're used to living on 98% of your income.
Totally. Well, I think all these things really have to happen in succession. The thing we talk about at a church of house churches is, I mean, these things are all really interconnected. If you're only giving
Yes.
2%, it means you're spending 98% somewhere else. And so you have to stop spending money in other places. Is it on your building? How do you do that? Well, you got to be able to leverage your building to capture some finances for the kingdom use.
Mhm.
And so, but if your
Yes.
building is designed with Noah's Ark on the wall and it's designed for 3 hours a week, nobody can rent it out. I mean, I'll have one event here that'll pay for 2 months of our mortgage. We have
Mm.
400 or so events here every year. Most of them are small, some of them are big, but our building is not designed to be a sacred place. Sacred things happen here. So churches
Mm.
are spending part of that 98% on their building and they can't recapture it. They're spending it on their staff because they haven't equipped people to do the works of service, and the clergy are doing all the work of the church. And so you got to get rid of some staff, and then you got to
Yes.
increase giving. But giving will increase when people see that their giving is going to other things other than the building and clergy only. And so I have found that people don't disparage giving to our church when they know some of
Mm.
that's going to our building or some of that's going
Mm.
to our staff, because people intuit. They get it. They know you got to have a staff to do it. But when your staff's bloated, a church across town our size has 3 or 4 times as many staff as we do, or they're spending so much on their building and they can't capture it. So how do you start? Well, I think you got to get the other things in line. You probably need less staff.
Yeah.
You need to redistribute pastoral leadership. You need to figure out a way where your building, you can share it with your city and maybe even rent it out for events and things like that, or at least a school or somebody being there. And but the next thing is, I would say just start partnering with a ministry. Let your church see this. Start talking about the beautiful value. Choose a ministry in your community where your people can go and serve and know the names. I'll give you an example. One of the ministries we partner with that we started with very early on was a ministry called Angel Reach. We love them. They partner with kids who have aged out of the foster care system. So when you turn 18 and or you've graduated high school and you're in the foster system, I think the state gives you like $250 or $500 and you're gone. They don't pay that foster family anymore to support you. And so most of the time you got an 18-year-old kid who's never had a family and they're on their own. So Angel Reach takes them in and helps them transition into society. Yesterday at our Sunday gathering, a lady came to me, introduced me to somebody. She and her family introduced me to a kid. I think it was 19 or so. And I said, oh, great. How do y'all know each other? And she said, we met through Angel Reach. Now this family is real connected to each other. And they know that we give to this ministry. We sent people to this ministry. So now they have a heart for this ministry. They're real involved in it. If you start highlighting ministries in your city, it's going to increase generosity in your church, not just generosity to the wallet, but generosity of the spirit. And people are going to want to give more and serve more and go more. So I would say start doing the right thing and then stop doing some things that aren't right and start making some changes. And if you don't, I don't know who else is going to do it. I mean, you're the one that's there right now leading this church. And if you don't do it, are you leaving it to the next generation? I think God's put you there right now to start making these changes in the right direction.
What a great challenge, Jason, and very practical and clear, because this is a challenge for every church wherever you're at. I think there's probably a level of conviction that every ministry leader that's listening to this is needing to process, and I think that's healthy. And I'm sure that's a process you go through as a pastor and as a leader. Is how can we give more? How can we maybe let go more, or really push our congregation to go and serve more in the community? Jason, as we wrap up this conversation around ministry partnerships, any kind of final thoughts or encouragement you would give to pastors that are listening to this today?
Yeah, I would say it really encourages me that Paul told Titus, the reason I left you in Crete was to straighten out what was unfinished. I mean, Paul planted a great church, but he needed somebody to come help straighten it out. That gives me a lot of comfort knowing that Paul needed somebody to straighten out some things that were unfinished. For us, we've made a lot of headway, but it's still unfinished. I mean, I never want this tension relieved for me. I always want to see, I have at the top of my board in my office, I have 2 words: reduce and refine. I'm always, and rethink is above that. Rethink what we're doing, reduce and refine. I mean, we're reducing and refining our calendar, our budget, all the time. We think about that with our staff. We think about that with ministry partnerships. I mean, we need to rethink this. How are we doing with it? And so I think we as leaders are always living in tension. Hey, where are we healthy? What is unfinished here? And then it's my job, since God's put me here and the rest of the leaders with me, we need to lead out of this towards more health. So if you're not where you want to be, great. You shouldn't be. You shouldn't want to be where you are. We should want to be where we're not yet. And it's our job, our responsibility, rethink and return to what Jesus, I think, originally intended for this to be.
So good. So good. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your transparency and authenticity and how to approach ministry partnerships. I think every pastor that's listening to this has gained both practical insights and understanding from your years of experience in this place, but I think also am walking away with maybe some sore feet from their toes being stepped on. And I think that's a healthy place for pastors to be. Sometimes is we need our toes to be stepped on sometimes. And I appreciate you being willing to do that and challenge us as we consider how we can more effectively partner with other ministries to serve our community and beyond. If you're listening to this and you haven't yet gone to our website, rethink and return podcast.com, I want to encourage you, go to the website. You can get access to the show notes for this episode, listen to all of our past episodes, but most importantly, I want you to get on the email list so you can get the latest updates for new podcasts and other resources as those come out. So go to rethink and return podcast.com and get on the email list. Jason, thank you so much for leading us through this episode.
Nils, thanks, man. I really appreciate your help in getting this conversation out there.